Well, hello there, friends. Today we're going to talk about a hot button issue. It's not actually really a hot button issue, but I think it is really important, and it is audiobooks. Should you, as an author, invest in audiobooks? My name is Seth. I'm a full-time fantasy author. I make YouTube videos about being an author, about writing, about audiobooks now. So if that's something that you're into, then definitely stick around. I got a comment asking me about audiobooks, and I thought, this is really a topic that is big enough and complex enough that it would really benefit from a video. So I want to share a little bit about my experience with audiobooks. First, audiobooks are a huge growing market, especially in the fantasy genre. They're growing across the board as more and more people are starting to adopt them. But there's something that's really important to understand. They are a separate market from readers. I did a video a while back trying to parse out whether listening to an audiobook is reading or not. And I came to the conclusion personally that it's not reading. It's actually a different thing. It uses a different part of your brain. It uses a different set of skills in terms of comprehension. And I stick by that. And I think the argument is made stronger by the fact that people who buy audiobooks typically don't buy physical copies or ebooks. And people who buy physical copies or ebooks don't buy audiobooks, right? So we have two distinct audiences. And that's not a bad thing, because the audio world is, again, exploding. We are getting more and more people who are listening to fiction, and at the same time, we are still maintaining our numbers of people who read fiction. And so that just means the pie is getting bigger, which means that everybody's slice of it can get bigger. On top of that, creating an audiobook is easier than ever, thanks in large part to our overlords at Amazon, who have created ACX, an exchange where people who write books can interface and engage with narrators to produce an audiobook. And there are really two ways that you can do that. The less popular royalty split, and then also just paying somebody directly in order to read the audiobook. But that all brings us to the question of, should I, as an author, invest in audiobooks? Because it can be a little bit expensive, especially if you are new. Most new authors are not going to find that the royalty split option is available to them. And instead, you're going to end up putting out a couple of $1,000s in order to record a quality audiobook. Now, that depends a little bit on how long your book is, but I'm just using sort of standard fantasy pricing here. Now, full disclosure, I have never walked through the process of managing the production of an audiobook. I've always outsourced that to other people. So for all of my audiobooks, I actually sublicense the rights to other companies who then procure a narrator, oversee the process, and publish, and then I get a portion of the royalties from the sales of those books. That was a deliberate choice on my part because running audiobook production is an entire business in and of itself. And I didn't want to have to learn another business on top of already having to learn being an author. Moving into the future, I'm not sure. I might actually start taking more of that on because I'm kind of in a position where I can now afford to learn something new. But I just wanted to be upfront that I have never actually walked through that process. However, I know a significant number of people who have. I've talked with many of them in great detail about what is required so that I can weigh the pros and cons of it. And I want to just share a little bit about my mentality going into audiobooks. They are a great and growing market. However, it is still a new market. And books that don't sell in ebook and physical copies also don't sell in audiobook. Now, there are a few audiobooks that I've seen that actually sell better on audio than they do physical or ebook. However, this is a rare phenomenon. It's an edge case, and so we're not going to consider it typical. I would not bet on your book being one of those books because they are so rare. Most of the time, if a book is doing well on audio, it is also doing well in print and, more importantly, ebook. So if you are in a situation where you are sitting on an ebook and it is not selling, then audio is not going to save you. There's something else that you have to figure out first. It could be messaging, it could be the cover, it could be where you're trying to sell it, like what categories you're trying to sell it in, or it could just be the content of the book itself. Adding a voice and having somebody narrate it does not automatically make your book sell. And that is super important. I think often as authors, we can get caught in this trap where we think that moving to a new media, moving to a new category, or moving to new customers is going to automatically improve the sales of our book. That's not how it works. So that would sort of be my first caution, is if you are not selling ebooks or physical copies, then it's not realistic to expect to sell audiobooks, which means that it's probably not a great idea to invest thousands of dollars in hiring a narrator in order to get your audiobook so you can take it to market. On the other hand, if you are selling ebooks, if you are selling physical copies, and you don't have to be selling a lot of them, but if you are selling them, then investing in an audiobook is probably a good idea. Of course, you're going to be recouping your cost over a long period of time, and so just make sure that you're doing the math to figure out how many books you actually have to sell in order to recoup your costs. That cost is obviously going to be higher the more well-known and practiced your narrator is. But narrators can also bring an audience themselves. It's not huge. And even when I've worked with really popular narrators, the bump that they have brought has been there, but it hasn't been enough to offset my own audience. And so I think it's really important to understand that you not only have to bring a quality product to market, but you also have to bring the initial people who are going to buy it. You have to have audience that wants an audiobook. Otherwise, you're in for a long, hard slog as you climb the audiobook hill. And then the second piece of the equation is just judging whether or not you should be managing it yourself or you should be outsourcing it. Again, I elected to outsource because I'm sort of obsessed about taking things off my plate and delegating tasks to other people because I just want to write books. And so I clear my schedule in order to be able to do that. Maybe you're not in that same situation. Maybe the management comes easier to you, and maybe you're more interested in having creative control over the entire process. In that case, producing the audiobooks yourself is probably going to be the better choice for you. In terms of revenue, it's certainly more lucrative if you're actually selling. But again, that's the crux of it. You have to actually sell the audiobooks if you want to make profit. And finally, I think it's really important to address sort of the elephant in the room, which is that AI is now producing audiobooks. There are AI voices that are being trained on real narrators' voices and are able to produce audiobooks in a fraction of the time for a fraction of the cost. The question is, should you do it? I'll be upfront and honest. I think there are a lot of ethical concerns around using AI narration, and until those have been addressed, I would strongly discourage it. On top of that, the technology isn't actually good enough yet to produce quality work. We haven't quite gotten over the uncanny valley when it comes to AI voices. And the longer someone listens to an AI voice, the weirder it gets, which means that they're probably going to put your book down. And if they put your book down, there's a high chance they're not going to pick it back up. Choosing a good narrator is one of the most important things when it comes to audiobooks. And so to add a subpar narrator in the form of AI is just, it's a bad business move. Does that mean that it will always be a bad business move? No. If the ethical concerns around people's voices being stolen can be addressed and the narration gets better, then it might actually be a viable option. It's just not a viable option yet. Of course, that is my opinion, and you might disagree. Let me know down in the comments, actually, if you do. I think there will come a day when AI narration is so close to perfect that it is a viable way to get an audiobook. And actually, I think that we're going to see more multicast stories that use AI narration for specific voices, rather than just reading the entire book. And I'm curious to see what would happen if you had a human narrator narrate the story, but then had the dialogue be interjected by a cast of AI voices. I'm not sure. All I know is that I am not going to be using AI for the reasons I listed above, and I don't think you should either, at least when it comes to audiobook narration. If you have any other questions about the process or anything else related to audiobooks, definitely let me know, and I'll do what I can to answer them.